Obviously, we are to remain seated during, it sounds like when you're getting on a plane, we are to remain seated during ramp tests so as to not distort results. However, some of the workouts call for and include instructions for standing during the intervals, namely during sweet spot workout in the base phase. But what about workouts in build and specialty phases? Was it okay to stand during some of those intervals? Workouts like Mount Foraker and Denali, for example, are longer supra-threshold efforts that probably have enough time to add in some standing to break up the monotony of the intervals. Or should those be completely entirely seated to get the most bang for your buck? Thanks for revolutionizing my training. I feel like a totally different rider from last year after following your plans, and I can't wait to see what I can achieve next year with all that I've built up in 2020. Well, first of all, good job, Bob. Way to go on getting faster and committing to a plan. So in my mind, the standing thing, we get this question quite a lot, and turns out it's a question that a lot of people do have. So I think it's worth us covering this again. For me, like really in terms of standing, it really depends on what you do. Like in other words, like what you are planning on doing for whatever event you have. And specificity matters more when you get closer to that event. So like you probably don't have to worry about working it in if you're a long way out from your event. But if this is something that you're going to do, then yeah, you have to worry about standing or seating or staying seated as it pertains to your event as you get closer to it. There's also kind of one or two other points too. One thing to know is standing is inherently less efficient than sitting, right? Like you're using more muscle contraction to support your body and balance your body on the moving bicycle. You just are. That doesn't mean that you can't become efficient in that position, but it's just more inefficient inherently than sitting down just because there's more muscle contraction going on. And then also like the thing is a lot of people will say, well, standing's super inefficient for me, or standing is really efficient for me. Like if you're Brandon, he stands a lot, right? So it's probably more efficient for him. But remember, you're good at what you do. So if you're listening to this and wondering why the heck is somebody asking this, standing is super easy and I'm really good at it. Well, if you do it a lot, you're probably good at it, right? If you don't do it a lot, you're probably not that good at it. So those are kind of like the key points I wanted to make. Nate, you have some points on here too.
Yeah, it depends on the type of, so first off, it's perfectly okay. And it is almost a requirement on the trainer is because it just hurts more on the trainer, like your bottom. I have 3 saddle sores at the moment and it is not fun. Oh. So get in and out of saddle. That's okay. If you get out of for a long time and you're a road racer and you're doing lots of climbs, that's probably fine too. If you're a TTer or a triathlete and you're training to stay in position for, X amount of minutes, that's where you're probably going to want to limit it and try to stay in that aero position or at least seated and then work in aero position as much as you can. If you're if you're a triathlete and you're finding you have to get out of the saddle every 10 minutes, that's going to seriously slow yourself down like a lot on a flat triathlon. So don't worry about it. You see on my RAM test too, I'll get out for like 3 to 5, probably 3 seconds, just a couple pedal strokes and sit back down, usually because I'm uncomfortable. And it's fine. You're not like blowing everything up. What we don't want on the ramp test is a standing effort at the end where your upper body is like taken into account and you're using some anaerobic power from your upper body muscles to generate more watts and thus put you at a higher level than what you would be if you were seated. But just up and down a little bit, that's fine.
Yeah. Pete, what are your thoughts on this one?
I'm a kind of a chronically seated athlete, at least cyclist. If I'm standing up, I'm probably in trouble. Bad things are about to happen. There's alarm bells going off. But I stand, I have to do the same thing. It's more the mental break, just like Nate, where I need 3 or 5 seconds or 10 seconds in any longer kind of sustained interval, because it's a comfort thing. You just want, it's breaking up the flow. It's something to look forward to. Like on our local long climb, I stand every 10 minutes because it's something to break it up and look forward to. And it's probably only 5 or 10 seconds and I probably go slower when I stand, but it's okay. And then you sit back down and you're kind of engaged for another chunk of time. So I have to do it just like everybody else.
Amber, did you ever so here's like the common thing, and we tend to paint with a very broad stroke of the brush here. We tend to say, we have one example of a pro athlete, and we assume all pro athletes are just like that. And the one example with standing in particular, everyone's like, well, Contador used to do 40 to 60 minute standing intervals going up climbs. So I guess that means that every pro probably does that. Did you ever do that in your pro career? How did you work on this seated versus standing stuff?
Yeah, no, I never actually did specific standing drills like that, where it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to go out and do 10-minute standing or 20-minute standing. I did know some people who did. They tended to be climbers who were looking to win big stages on really long mountaintop finishes. But it's absolutely not necessary, even if you are a climber. I think, there's a few things that you can work on in terms of the mechanics of climbing out of the saddle. And that was something that I did work on, but that was more something that I would work on as I'm climbing when I decide to get out of the saddle, but not specifically something that I'm going to do standing intervals to accomplish. So some of the mechanics of it are worth paying attention to try to get and become more efficient. And the other thing I think about this, and as far as standing on the trainer, one of the things that you can really work on in terms of technique is the transition from sitting to standing, and then from standing to sitting back in again, and getting really smooth with that and being able to do it fluidly and gracefully, and not have to think about it so much becomes a really, really helpful skill when you're climbing or when you're racing.
Whenever you're in a group, like you're in a pace line or something else like that, and that one rider gets out of the saddle and there's like a 1 foot movement backward of their bike, it's always so scary, right? Because it's a small thing, but it could cause so much chaos. Like that transition, right, Pete? You can smooth it out. Whenever I ride behind you, and the rare times that you do get up, there's zero change.
Do you hear the alarm bells too when I stand up?
Yeah, exactly. Steam starts coming out the ears. Yeah.
But like John was saying, if you know that your bike moves back and forth when you stand up and sit down, and you kind of accommodate for that a little bit, and there's someone on your wheel, that's part of the smooth transition that Amber's talking about. So you can train both the bike not moving fore and aft, but also where you sit on the saddle. Like you should sit down exactly where you're comfortable put out power area, and you should stand up directly into that kind of more efficient standing. So it's the same thing. It's all part of that puzzle, but practicing is important.
Yeah. One thing I found with that too is that it changes depending on like which bike you're on. So for me, if I'm riding on my road bike, standing is very different than when I am standing on my mountain bike. When you're standing on like mountain bike terrain or cyclocross terrain is like a really good example of it, just because you have even less traction a lot of the time, whether it's conditions or tire related. But you really have to stand differently. I find that when traction is limited, so maybe you're on slick roads, if you're on a road, something like that, I find that I hinge more at my hips to keep my chest lower, but that also keeps my waist and my butt further back, so then I can get more traction. So it's not like one person's technique will match. Like you look at Contador and his hips are super far forward, right? And he kind of like pedals with his whole entire body, a very different pedaling style. You'll see tons of different ways to skin this cat, so to speak. But the main thing that you want to get to with this is something that's comfortable and efficient, and something that you can repeat, like Pete said. And that's going to change depending on which bike you're on, for sure. Yeah.
Can I say something that grinds my gears?
Yeah,
so
sure. Good, very appropriate for this. Yeah.
This is I didn't even mean to do that. It's the picture of the indoor cyclist who has their hips way forward, like they're climbing this steep hill. It's in a lot of marketing pictures. Like no one does that indoor on the trainer. You got to be on this really steep hill, and it looks cool. Like it looks like you're going fast, and a lot of companies do it. I'm talking to everybody, and I love you all, but you see them like way over the handlebars. I'm like, how are you doing that? That's not appropriate for indoor training. Like I want to see someone try it. Like Caleb Ewing it almost. On an indoor trainer.
Yeah, in most cases, if you see a rider like Caleb Ewan, he's a world apart, right? He's his own beast. But in most cases, if they're folded over like that, you'll see they aren't drifting their pelvis really far forward in their upper body. If you're folded over like that, actually your pelvis is usually fairly far back. Like we've talked about this, and you can see in the sprinting video that we have with Pete, it's how to sprint. Go onto our YouTube channel, you can check it out. We talk about how the nose of your saddle is likely going to be just barely brushing your hamstrings as your bike wags back and forth in a sprint. And that's really more or less kind of where you want your body to be. There are times when you'll drift further forward, sure, but it's not like a crazy over the front sort of a thing. And for what?
Go ahead, Nate. You see that position sprinting uphill. because that's when you do have to put your body, especially mountain bikers. You watch Nino sprint uphill, and he put, he's going up a 50% grade, and he's really folded over in order to get the traction and balance right. But when you're on a level trainer, it just, I don't know. It's everyone was not going to be able to not see it now.
Speaking of trainers too, a big question that we get on this a lot of the time is, well, why should I even bother like standing on a trainer? Because it's so different than what I experience when I ride outside, because the bike is fixed and everything else. And there is like a valid point to that, but I think that it's actually like its own skill set that you kind of figure out. Like you learn how to stand effectively on the trainer, and you kind of treat that separately. It's not like it's training you to be able to stand better. And another big thing people say is like, oh, well, rollers would allow me to be able to ride exactly how I would ride outside, so therefore it would be a better solution. And take it from somebody that does absolutely all of their training on the rollers, and no, they're a totally different beast. I stand on the rollers pretty regularly for the same reasons we've already talked about, breaking things up, that sort of a thing. But it's very different from what you experience. Even when you have ones on boom racks, inside ride, everything else, it's still totally different than what you experience when you're riding outside. So yeah, those are, I think, important points to make with that.